Welcome to the Motoring Podcast, your weekly discussion of motoring news. This is episode 556 on Tuesday, the 12th of December, 2023. Hello, I'm Alan, and yes, it's just me this week. It's another solo one with lots of ums and ers and pauses all the way through because I'm a far lazier editor than Andrew normally is. Anyhow, this week we'll be talking about... I will be talking about November's new car registration figures. We'll be talking about battery swapping yet again. One of these technologies that goes quiet for ages and then there's a sort of tsunami of stuff comes and hits. And there'll also be a refreshing lack of adverts for vibrating molecule-enhanced snow-clearing air fresheners. I don't know if you've been getting those about every third, whatever it's called, zeet, these days, but I know that I certainly have been. Anyway, start with a couple of stories of follow-up. First one is really a sort of time-constrained one. We've been talking about rules of origin and the tariffs. This is an outcome from Brexit, and there's been a big worry about the fact that as of the 1st of January next year, 45% of the value of an electric vehicle and 60% of the battery pack has to have originated in either the UK or the EU. This is still not quite possible just yet. The European Commission has proposed a 3-year delay to those laws, as I think I've just said, on certain UK exported and imported vehicles. So it works both ways. And the idea of this means that the introduction of those rules of origin will be pushed back from the 1st January 2024 to the 1st of January 2027. It does need to be voted on by all 27 EU member states, but supposedly, and according to the Financial Times, according to the Autocar article, it'll be linked in the show notes, the majority are already in favour and they're expected to be asked to vote next week. I think this is one of these cases where it should go through, but you know, the biggest danger is the UK government does something which annoys somebody, and then that hurts it. Of course, this would hurt in both directions, but the majority of weight coming from the EU to the UK, given the EU has historically been our largest trading partner. So lots of stuff there. By the way, just as another aside, the European Automobile Manufacturers Association, that's ACEA that we talked about last week, has called on EU member states to unanimously support the proposal. So it's not just the straight up politicians who are calling for this. It is the whole industry. So that would be a good thing. We'll keep an eye on that. Now, that has to be voted on by the end of the week, I think it was. Oh, yes, they're expected to be asked to vote next week. I knew I'd seen it somewhere. So yes, that's hopefully good news. I mean, don't want to get political, but crisis of our own making as ever. And fingers crossed that passes through. Obviously, we'll be on top of that one and let you know. The other piece of follow-up relates to import and export once again. Tesla has lost its legal action against Sweden's postal service as a dispute with Nordic trade unions escalates. This is according to The Guardian. The story's on in a number of different places. The essential so you're aware that this started because Tesla wanted to sort of... No, it started with the mechanics, didn't it? The mechanics at the service centres, and then that spread to the ports, and then it spread to cleaners and also to the Swedish postal system, PostNord, that is refusing to deliver to Tesla. The big knock-on effect for that is that the only way to receive a license plate from the Swedish vehicle licensing organization, name which escapes me, is by post, and Swedish Postal Union are refusing to deliver to Tesla dealerships or to the corporate offices or anything to do with Tesla. So as a result, you cannot register a Tesla in Sweden right at the moment. Also, a large Danish pension fund said on Wednesday that it would sell all its holdings in Tesla because they refused to enter into the deals. On and on and on. So we're at dock workers, drivers, electricians, cleaners, etc., etc., etc. Elon Musk, richest on-paper man in the world, said last week, "I disagree with the idea of unions. I just don't like anything which creates a lords and peasants kind of thing." There we go. So yes, some Swedish pension funds, by the way, have urged Tesla to sign the agreement with the union, but have so far held off selling their shares. Well, they'll break down on that one at some point. So yes, again, keep an eye on that one. See what happens. Anyway, let's move on from that. Other thing was the Cybertruck seems to have disappeared from the showroom in central Boston. So maybe they're doing a tour and it's moved to some more minor ones now. But it does seem to have disappeared into the ether again. Read into that what you will. Anyway, new news. The new news actually came out just before I recorded last week's podcast. I just didn't have time to look at it, read it, or think about it. And it is the SMMT new car registration figures. So registrations in November were 156,525. Which sounds like quite a high number until you realise that is, and it is. It's up 9.5% on last November and just 0.1% down on pre-pandemic levels. There has been a decline in EV uptake compared to the equivalent month last year, where it was particularly high. But year to date, uptake is up overall 27.5%. There are some comments here about rules of origin needed to avoid EU tariffs. That other story that was in follow-up actually broke before this one. All in all, comparing month to month, petrol is up 7.4%. Diesel is down 16%. Only 4,663 diesel cars registered. Now, remember that is just pure diesel and not diesel mild hybrids or even, should you be able to think of any, a diesel hybrid. Mild hybrids 29,000. Pure grown up hybrids. 20,525. Battery electric vehicles, 24,359. And PHEVs, plug-in hybrids, 15,871. Some chunky changes in the sort of private fleet balance. Business down 32.7%. Only 2,970 vehicles were registered to small businesses. Fleet companies up 25% and private down 5.9%. So you compared to November 2022. So yeah, everything's being held up by fleet. Now fleet does include lots of company cars, lots of people on the sort of salary sacrifice type schemes as well. But you know, the number of private sales is dropping. It's only 38.7% of the market share, almost 60% for fleet and 2% for business. Best sellers, not a single electric only model amongst them. Audi A3, and of course the numbers here are all very, very small, very close together because of just the segmentation of the market, number of new models that are out there. Number 10 is the Audi A3 though. 2,726, selling seven fewer than number 9, which is the Volkswagen Golf. MG HS is at 8, Vauxhall Mokka is at 7, Kia Sportage at Sixt with 3,045. So just over 300 vehicles splitting that second half of the table. The Ford Kuga is in at number 5. The Mini is in at number 4 with 3,526 registrations. And then there's a small gap before the Nissan Qashqai at 4,116. And then the Vauxhall Corsa and the Ford Puma out ahead by 113 units at 4,298. Puma remains at the top of the leaderboard for the year, ahead of Qashqai, Corsa, Sportage, Tucson, Model Y, Mini, Duke, Mocha, and Audi A3. As a quick aside, I saw one of the new Minis, the latest generation of Mini, just the other day on the road, and it looked pretty good. It was an electric one, and it had a sort of small motor sound as its broadcast of movement noise, which was kind of cool. It did almost sound like it was internal combustion. Most of the text surrounding this is most of the text surrounding the numbers this month, are all about rules of origin, and we've kind of covered that. Andrew has prepared for me the spreadsheet of doom. Lucky me. There's a bit of red, quite a lot of green, and some white. Those are our thresholds are 15% either way. Before we will read something out. So, the reds: Abarth, Alpine, Bentley, Dacia, DS, Fiat, and Genesis. Out of those, I mean, the small manufacturers are down. Well, small sales down about 40 to 50%. In those, DS down 75%, registered 106 vehicles. Fiat down 20%. Nissan down 22, Polestar down 53, and Tesla down 72. And that could have an awful lot to do with that sort of disparity in EV registrations. You know, the Tesla, the peaks and troughs of of Tesla imports. So last year it was 6,025 Tesla were registered in November. This year 1,648. It is one of those things to bear in mind, is the sort of Tesla surging. Significant drop though. I mean, significant drop. But let's just see what happens. What happens next month if it is a massive peak instead. All the greens, Alfa Romeo doing pretty well, up 108%, BMW up 16%, Citroen up 30%, Cupra up 75%. The MG award for crazy increases goes to GWM Aura, 94 vehicles instead of 5. That's an increase of 1,780%, but kind of meaningless. Jaguar up over 100%, yay. Jeep up 140%, Land Rover up 35%, Maserati 132%, Mercedes-Benz 48%, MG 34%, Peugeot up 144%, Renault 83%, Seat 20%, Skoda 24%, Smart 153%. Are the number ones rating coming on stream in the UK now? That may well explain that. I would think it probably does. SsangYong 43%, Suzuki 56%, Vauxhall 39%, Volvo 15%, other British 53%, and other imports 24%. So kind of nothing. A few outliers there among some of the big, some of the larger European brands, European commodity brands there, the use of Peugeots, Renaults, and such like, but mostly not huge changes. Big drop, of course, being Tesla. But that may well be of their own making. As a result of some of the challenges with both EV and private buyers, then industry bosses are calling for EV incentives to aid private buyers. Not a massive surprise in that, given the basically. It's as long as we can get somebody else's money to do it, that's great. As it is already, as it notes in the Autocar article, and that Mike Hawes, chief executive of the SMMT, has noted, the bulk of EV sales are still to business buyers. I mean, we see that with the fleet numbers every month, and they do benefit from tax breaks for that. It's one of the reasons why more people are doing that kind of thing for salary sacrifice, perhaps, than buying privately. However, if you are a private EV buyer, you get no subsidy at all. So that may well have an awful lot to do with it. So perhaps they're suggesting that maybe the government brings back incentives for that. A counter argument, of course, is that this is bringing back. These are incentives for people to go out and buy expensive new cars, and you only get the taxpayer money if you already have the money to be in a position to want to buy one of these. So yeah, I mean that's the counter argument that you will hear. So let's see what happens with that. I'm not expecting a massive movement on that one, not given some of the other sort of shifts in environmental and business type things. They're probably going to say that they've given up enough by paying millions and millions to Nissan over the years to build battery plants and EV factories. At one end, similarly, the support to JLR for the planned battery factory, and to BMW, etc., that they may decide that they've thrown enough money at that problem, and that sure, the businesses can benefit, but us private buyers, not so much. Next story is about UK fuel prices. There have been significant drops in November, according to the RAC. And you notice they put these reports out pretty much every month. So average petrol prices in the UK dropped by 7.5 pence per litre, down to £1.46, almost £1.47 per litre. Diesel fell 7 pence to 154.4 per litre, but that's still much higher than they should be. So they're saying that prices for petrol are still about 10 pence per litre higher than they should be, compared with 5 pence per litre for diesel. And this is all to do with the disparity and the increases and decreases in wholesale price that the retailers are paying. So wholesale price goes up and down. Retail price pretty much only goes up. Any reduction in wholesale price is very rarely reflected in the pump price for us consumers. Yeah. So yeah. There's it's one of those. What can you do about it other than support campaigns like this one from the RAC? Really. It is difficult. It is difficult because it's, there's not a lot of competition. So yeah, I don't really know how to round that one off, to be perfectly frank. So I'm just going to move on slightly. Euro NCAP win this week's award for Statements of the Bleeding Obvious. They're saying that bigger, heavier SUVs present safety concerns, according to this article from Autocar. It'll be linked in the show notes. The Euro NCAP starts off basically by saying that it's not their rules that are to blame for the popularity of SUVs, which it says are bad for safety and the environment. They've rated 11 new cars in its final round of testing for 2023, 7 of which were SUVs. That included the Mercedes-Benz EQE, the Kia EV9, the VinFast VF8. That'll be an interesting one. The Xpeng G9, the BYD Tang, the BYD Seal U, which sounds painful, and the Honda ZR-V. Also tested the new 5 Series, the Volkswagen ID7, the Smart H3, and the Hyundai Kona Electric. Points out that the latter of those two are crossovers. For those of us following along at home, we'll have noticed that the BMW 5 Series is the only one identifiable as a traditional saloon car. Majority SUVs tested were awarded 5 stars, but Euro NCAP suggests a trend towards heavier, more powerful and taller cars risks the safety of other drivers and says they're more damaging to the environment than smaller, lighter cars. Okay. Yes. I mean, yes. Yes, of course. But also, they're the ones that have just got 5 stars. The people are going to say, I want my family to be safe. And you wanting your family to be safe tends to be more important than other families to be safe. So, we're always going to have that bias towards buying safer for us, and other people can go out and buy safer for them, and then they'll be just as safe, theoretically. What else? How were the results here? EQE scored the highest for its safety assistance. It was let down by its airbag system. Kia EV9 got 5 stars due to its coverage of child safety equipment. Smart Hash 3 did well. Both passengers in the front seat made contact during a crash, and the car wasn't equipped with child presence detection. So that was noted against it. The new Hyundai Kona Electric, which Euro NCAP said was a real disappointment and lucky to avoid 3 stars. Its crash avoidance and driver assistance systems were lacking, didn't represent enough of an improvement over the previous Kona. So does that mean that it's actually less safe? Or does that mean that some software didn't work the way that Euro NCAP expected it to work? Honda ZR-V also got 4 stars, despite being the lightest in the test. I'm not sure how the lightness and that works, because, the Rover 100 was an awfully light car. But yes, I think we all remember the Euro NCAP results for that. The BYD Tang, the BYD CLU, and the Xpeng G9 all got 5 stars. G9 lacking only pedestrian head protection and abdominal protection for smaller occupants. And the VinFast VF8 achieved 4 stars, being marked down for the lack of robustness in its seatbelts, which is the most complimentary thing I think I've ever heard anyone say about the VinFast VF8, or indeed any other VinFast. Of the executive students on test, the Volkswagen ID7, apologies, I missed that earlier on. That, of course, is a saloon car, albeit electric, and BMW 5 Series both comfortably scored 5 stars, with the ID7 has seen 95% for adult protection, one of the year's best overall scores, and the BMW matched the ID7 all around. Didn't score quite as highly for pedestrian protection in frontal impacts. It's probably the great big grille. Enough of that. Next one, a slight sidestep. It is more Tesla news, I'm afraid. The German rental company Sixt is going to start getting rid of its Tesla fleet, simply due to the repair costs. Repair costs and residual values. You've got to realize that these bit large fleet companies like Hertz, Sixt, etc. When they buy a car, they're not just looking at the new price. Well, sometimes they are just looking at the new price. I think it depends which segment they're in. Sometimes they're looking at the new price. That's how you end up with DPs and stuff and across continental Europe. But generally they're looking at whole life cost of the vehicle. If the upfront cost is low enough, then it doesn't really matter if it's worth nothing after 8, 9, 10 months a year. But sometimes when it's a more expensive vehicle, the whole cost of ownership does come into it. And one of the challenges that Sixt is having are repair costs for their Teslas, and also the fact that the residual values are all over the place. Every time Tesla decides to drop the prices then of new Teslas, then by significant amounts and without any warning, then the residual prices of existing ones tanks. They all go down even further, and that's just become a bit too much for Sixt. Sixt is, by the way, continuing. This is nothing to do with actually having its electric fleet. It's going to be replacing them with BYD and others, but it has a commitment to buy at least 100,000 BYD cars globally. That's out of the 250,000 cars they have in over 100 companies around the world, according to this Jalopnik factory. Hertz is taking a step back from EVs entirely by the end of the decade, but again, it's having trouble with the basically the repair costs. But yeah, Hertz is taking a general step back. On the other hand, if you are looking for a cheap used Tesla for reasons, then keep an eye out for the Sixt auctions and vehicles coming through the auctions off rental. That might well be a good way to get one. Speaking of government subsidies, earlier on, there is a 700. So the government has announced a £70 million scheme to stimulate the installation of ultra-rapid EV chargers at motorway service stations. But it's still going to miss its target of having 6 devices at each site in England by the end of the year. In fairness, so this was as part of the Department for Transport's vision for the rapid charging network in England that was published in May 2020. They planned for there to be at least 6 high-power capable open access, that's 150 to 350 kilowatt, charge points at each service station in England by 2023. The ones that are missing them at the moment, are Barton Park on the A1M, Carlisle North on the M6, Leicester Forest on both sides of the M1, Streatham southbound on the M5, and T-Bay South on the M6. Now, some of them don't have ultra rapids as well. That's Carlisle Southwaite North, Carlisle Southwaite South, Streatham northbound, and T-Bay North. They do all have 50 kilowatt chargers, though, so you can still charge. It's a tough one. Other than Leicester Forest, which is in the middle of Leicester, all the others are pretty remote, and you can imagine that the big issue there isn't will. It is the ability to actually connect to the grid at high enough volumes. So yeah, that's an interesting one to have. But actually, given the number of motorway services, whilst they haven't reached the target, they're pretty close. They're definitely in the amber on that one, which is pretty decent. There is a quote in the Autocar article that says the public charging industry has repeatedly said the limited availability of grid connections is a major obstacle to improving charge point provision. Toddington Harper, the CEO of GridSurf, said almost every issue of speed of implementation is down to the speed of grid connections. I'm not kicking the grid here. It was designed for a completely different purpose, and adapting it to what we need while keeping the lights on is a huge task. But we can often be delayed by months or more waiting for a connection. The process you have to go through is hard at best and infuriating at worst. So, and I think that given the T-based services, if you've ever been on either side of the M6, you'll understand just why getting a very large, essentially electricity pipe to it is tricky. Meanwhile, BP Pulse is expanding its UK charging network, according to Electrive. Not so much in mainland UK, but it does plan to install 200 charging stations in Northern Ireland with the Henderson Group, which is a retail company, as well as opening a charging hub in London. They sent that 17 charging locations are already live at BP Spa sites across Northern Ireland, and 4 more at Henderson retail Spa sites. They've also opened a major charging hub in central London. It's in Q Park, Pimlico, and it has 8 charging columns with 150 kilowatt fast chargers, and 16 vehicles can simultaneously charge there, which is quite impressive. 2 of those charge points will be dedicated for Uber drivers as part of a link up between them. One last bit of EV charging news, because goodness me, it has been the EV charging podcast this week. Charging companies are still looking for profit on some of them. It seems that if you're not one of the motorway related charging firms, then it can be a bit trickier to get medium and long term profitability. Andy Palmer, who now leads PodPoint, is saying it's very hard to make money in the business of providing plugs. PodPoint, majority owned by EDF Energy, and it's decided to move away from fast chargers to concentrate on home and workplace charging instead, and as a result, it's looking to have sort of positive cash flow by 2027. Positive free cash flow by 2027. So it's a bit less of a volatile market. I think the home charging market. That brings us to the Guilt Minute, of course. Guilt Minute is the quick break in the show where we ask for a tad of financial support to keep the lights on, the hosting running. And if you feel the Motoring Podcast is worth a small consideration every month, then you can become a patron. The different levels of patron include different levels of commitment from us to you, including being able to watch the show recorded live. We also have a small range of merchandise in our spring store, from stickers to mugs and t-shirts. If you don't have any spare cash, we do completely understand, then you can help us by following for free from a podcast player to receive every show as they're released, and by liking and rating the show in whatever way your podcast supplier lets you. If you've done all that, and some of you do, so thank you very much, then the last thing you can do is to recommend us to your friends or colleagues. And thank you very much for all of those of you who do some or all of that. It really is appreciated. Next up, new car news. Just a couple in here this week. It's a quiet time of the year for new car launches. But we kick off with the new Suzuki Swift. It gains design updates, according to Autocar, and updated infotainment. The design updates, I don't think they're successful. I think a few of us will argue that they're successful. The poor thing looks bloated and fat. It really needs a water pill or something. It's just a bit bubbly now. It's not the sort of sharp-rounded. Yes, that does make sense. An Audi TT could be described as sharp and rounded at the same time. Look that there used to be. It is a bit more amorphously plasticine than perhaps it was before. It's got a new front grille, L-shaped front lights, updated front wings, and new lights at the rear. It'll be offered with a 1.2-litre three-cylinder mild hybrid. Previous generation car offered 82 horsepower, so I would expect something similar. You will be able to get it with all-grip auto four-wheel drive as an option, but no mention of the Suzuki Swift Sport, sadly. Hopefully that will follow along, but I don't know, the way some of the rules are these days, that may not quite be the same. Analog instruments, small digital screen in the driver's display. There are buttons instead for the climate control instead of rotary knobs. Nobody's completely settled on the UK market spec is not completely known. It'll be revealed earlier next year. And Suzuki are saying that it's been developed by keeping the concept of drive and feel, which does sound like something you could be arrested for. There's many other statements of strange words and combinations, but I think what really matters is that the 5-speed manual gearbox that's current and an automatic, definitely have a 5-speed manual gearbox. It's likely that an automatic option will be available given, the normal age of Suzuki Swift drivers. Prices are expected to start at above £17,000, given that that's roughly what it costs, what they cost currently at the bottom end of the Swift range. Points out here in 2017, when the previous generation Swift was launched, it started at about £11,000. So that's a significant jump. Be more details close to market launch, which is expected in early 2024. At the other end of the motoring market, Morgan has revealed the XP1 three-wheeler EV. Now, previously, Morgan has showed off an EV three-wheeler concept car based on the previous generation, and then at the time it just wasn't quite. The world wasn't quite ready for it, so they sort of shelved it, and it looks like this is the latest incarnation. There's no confirmed on sale date. I'll just say that right now. It is a prototype, but it is a real thing. It's been being driven around the place for about 3 months. It weighs less than 700 kilos, even in EV format. That's only about 60 kilos more than the internal combustion engine. And still, despite all of that, it carries a 33 kilowatt hour battery, so that's about the same size as the Mini Electrics one. That should give a fairly chunky range, given how light it is. I suppose it depends how heavy your right foot is, how far that'll go. But I'll bet that that when this current generation of Morgan three-wheeler was designed, then there was always space left in there. It's got a 100 kilowatt motor from iNetic, a UK company, in the transmission tunnel. There's other bits and pieces from around the place. But yes, they're saying they're trying to make it engaging. There aren't any gears, so we've tried to make it drive in such a way that it tunes your brains to do other things as you're driving along, so that it makes sure it has character. It's very cool. I love the look of it. As always, I love the look of the Morgan three-wheeler, really. And yeah, they've even, believe it or not, they have managed to drop the drag coefficient. Obviously, one of the more important aspects of the Morgan three-wheeler is the drag coefficient. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's very, very cool. So I'm sure it'll be hitting. They're sure. I'm sure that it will be available in production before very long. I think they're just tweaking and refining right at the moment. Last week I talked about NIO and Geely teaming up Last week I talked about NIO and Geely teaming up on battery swap technology and knowledge sharing around that and forming a strategic partnership. Well, this week it's Stellantis who have announced that they're going to introduce battery swap stations from 2024. So it says the car-making giant partners with battery manufacturer to develop subscription-only sites. So they're going to launch a network of battery swap stations that can fit you can swap the batteries in an EV in inverted commas less than 5 minutes. The technology comes from a San Francisco-based company called Ample, who are backed by Stellantis. The idea is that it'll be rolled out as a subscription. It'll be available in Madrid next year, and more sites will follow although it's not committing to locations and timelines just yet. To start with, it will be available only for the Fiat 500e, but they are expecting to expand it to include Citroën, Peugeot, Jeep, and Maserati. Yeah. Whereas NIO has designed a lot of their vehicle around the battery swap technology. It says here in this Autocar article that for Stellantis' tech, the swappable modular batteries have been designed as drop-in replacements for existing packs used by any electric car. And the idea is that it allows Stellantis to integrate its batteries without re-engineering platforms, saving cash. So I'm not quite sure if if that new slide-in battery will have the same value as your standard 500e battery, or whether or not you'll sort of the flip side of the convenience of the 5-minute swap will be that you have to have a much smaller battery instead, especially if it's going to be a system that can accommodate, Citroen, Peugeot, Jeep, and Maserati, all in the same sort of units, and swap stations, essentially. Supposedly, according to Stellantis, by the way, swap stations can be constructed and fully operational in as little as 3 days. But given the stories we've just talked about a little while ago, I'm sure that depends entirely on how quickly they can connect up to the grid. We'll leave you with a quote from Ampol CEO Khaled Hassouna, and he said, the combination of offering compelling electric vehicles that can also receive a full charge in less than 5 minutes will help remove the remaining impediments to electric vehicle adoption. Go for it. I don't think it's quite that simple. I think there's hearts and minds at play more than technology even now, and I'll be interested to see just how the same battery works in many vehicles which weren't primarily designed for battery swapping. Let's flick over now to points of interest. I like off-roaders and off-roading. I love the idea of overlanding, and the mega yacht builder Oxen has had its own go at building an overlanding vehicle. It makes a lot of sense if you're moving sort of down market from luxury yachts. So this is kind of cool. The Oxen 85, their flagship hybrid electric, partially solar powered, recycled aluminium hulled mega yacht, will set you back $11 million before any options. So their budget price offering that will use the 30%, that can use the 30% of the Earth not covered by water, is the Oxen U1700. It is based on a Mercedes-Benz Unimog, with what's closer to a house than a caravan parked on the back. This article from Jalopnik is well worth a look and a read. I have looked at smaller apartments than that. It is very, very nice. There's no precise prices here. It says the Jalopnik article says the company doesn't list a price for this massive house on wheels, but you can bet it won't be cheap. A standard single cab Unimog will run just shy of $250,000 all on its own. And I'd be surprised if you could purchase one of these for less than 7 figures. Depending on your financial situation, you can theoretically get a home loan for an RV. Ooh. So you can have 20 to 30 years of payments to make that $1 million plus a little more palatable. You only live once, you're unlikely to have YOLO on one side of this and One Life Live It plastered across the top of the windscreen, aren't you? But do go have a look at the Jalopnik article by Bradley Brownell. It is rather cool and it's rather lovely in there. That is quite nice. List of the week this week. Top 10 used cars everyone should own once. This is a cracking list. It is only a short one, but it is definitely not one of these AI generated ones. I or my family have owned, or my immediate family have owned a remarkable number of these, and I've driven most of them. But obviously, my choice is going to be number 10, which is a proper old-school Mercedes-Benz saloon, illustrated beautifully by a W124 on aero disc wheel trims, as all of the best are. So that's where I would be going. That's one of the places I'd be going on this list. But it's a very, very a list of very desirable vehicles. Right the way through, which I know which ones I would still like to have. There's a couple there that are still on my list of to owns at some point. And finally this week is an article by Andrew Frankel for Goodwood Road and Racing. This was not the article I went to Goodwood Road and Racing to look for, but it's the one I found, and it's the one I thought, I totally get on board with that. And it's Andrew Frankel talking about his Japanese import Kubota L22 tractor. I'm an absolute sucker for these little Kubota tractors. We had a B6000E when I was a lad, which was of some vintage. But yeah, it's a little short one about his Kubota, and it's very cool. So do have a little bit of a look and a read through that. It's like a second lunchtime read, but it's only 2 or 3 minutes to fill in. But it's easier to read it than it is for me to explain it, I think. That's me for this week. Andrew will be back next week. And then there's going to be a little bit of over Christmas and New Year. We know what it's like. People aren't in the car commuting on their own as much, so we don't tend to put out news shows. Also, there's mostly, to be perfectly honest, because there's never any flipping news. So we will be back at the start. So we'll be back with a normal. I think there might be a normal news show next week, and then there'll be a little bit of a gap, and then we will be back at the start of 2024. We've got some stuff to fill in the gap. As well, so there's not going to be nothing. There's just not going to be usual news shows. In the meantime, folks, don't forget that between now and next week, you can give us any feedback, share your thoughts with the show at Motoring Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, on Facebook, and on the contact page of motoringpodcast.com, the hub of all our activities. Remember, you can support us financially via Patreon, and please leave a review or rating on Apple Podcasts or however your podcast app lets you do such a thing. To get in touch with Andrew, you can search for Cracked Windscreen on Twitter or Mastodon. To get in touch with me, it's best to use either Twitter or Blue Sky. In both cases, I'm at AJP Bradley. That's Bradley. We'll both be back relatively soon, but until then, I've been Alan Bradley. He who's been doing some stuff in the background has been Andrew Clues. And safe motoring.